Father Leo again, and I have as my guest today a lady who's come from out of town, but she came to Peterborough and has been learning and has decided to become very active in the city. And as a LEAP meeting she went to, she talks about the lady who spoke and the people who were there and the recognition of how important the environment is, not only for us today, but for future generations and climate warming. And I had a great experiences with her on September the 27th. Yeah, where she had chaired the meeting that pulled in different organizations together and put on a fabulous day on September the 27th. Around 800 people showed up, and it shows that she is stirring up an awareness, creating a greater awareness of people in Peterborough of the importance of climate warming and how we as citizens must become involved in that too, because it's for us now, but for future generations. And her name is Trish Campbell, and certainly she did a fabulous job of chairing the committee that made that day such a success. And so Trish has agreed to do this interview and to share with what she has been up to and what she foresees with the climate warming organizations that are already done something wonderful, but there's still a lot of work to do. So Trish, I welcome you here this morning.
Thank you.
Pleasure to have you.
Nice to be here.
And like I said, I thought you did a tremendous job in chairing the committee that put on that demonstration on September the 27th. It was great.
It was a great day.
So I'd ask you to tell me a little bit about how you got so interested in climate warming and the environment. What would be some of the factors that make you realize climate warming is real?
Oh, yes. Well, just patterns and signs in nature that have changed since I was a child and was able to enjoy being outside, both in the country and up north around Lake Country. Things that had been changing over time and things that my children couldn't enjoy to the same degree that I could. And I think that's very universal because I've talked to other people and we've actually done a few workshops where people shared their memories about what they enjoyed as a child and then looked at how that has changed as an adult. So I think everybody recognizes that there are changes. Certainly there are changes in the way we communicate, the way we raise our children, the sort of the safety issues, social media, but there's also huge changes in the way people interact with nature. And part of that is due to the changes in the way we live and set up our environments and our neighborhoods and such. But going forward, I would say that I've always been, I would consider myself one among many who've had the benefit of education to try to remain informed by through the use of different media, to know what some of the concerns were and cautionary notes were about what was changing and how that was going to impact on our populations and globally. I think it was only when I retired and came to Peterborough and actually got to engage with a wonderful community of grassroots activists that I myself realized that there was a way to get more involved and just be informed and aware of the issues, but there was actually a way to engage and feel, if nothing else, feel empowered rather than helpless and hopeless.
Yeah.
So that was Peterborough, and Peterborough has a collection of really it has a wonderful collection of people who care about what happens in this community and beyond. and people with expertise, people who share their talents in many different ways with their community. And, it was through these connections that I became more involved with For Our Grandchildren, which, as the title suggests, is that we are doing things now so as to hopefully give our grandchildren a world to live in.
But I think the big thing behind it all, as I read today, and from the Friday gathering, it's climate warming. So how has your awareness of climate warming, and what are some of the dangers that we face if we don't do something about this issue?
Well, climate warming is about too much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and we've been doing this for, since the Industrial Revolution. It's been accumulating, but now it's reached the point of almost no return. In fact, we have about 10 years left before there is no return in terms of what's going up into the atmosphere and the, devastating effects it's going to have on mankind, on humankind.
So it's the carbon.
Yes.
Carbon.
Yes.
And where is that carbon coming from?
Well, from our fossil fuel industry, where we, everything from gas and cars to heating homes to plastic, the industries of what we do with fossil fuels, plastics being one of them. But we've just based our whole society on fossil fuel, and it's gotten to the point where we have a huge demand for this, what is produced by fossil fuels, and we haven't calculated until most recently, we haven't calculated the immense cost of living a lifestyle using fossil fuels.
But the thing is, though, Trish, like I heat this house and I need to be warm. I got a car out there. I need gas in it. Like, what can we as a people do? Because a lot of our economy is based on fossil fuels. So if you just shut down all fossil fuel, so I'm not sure just what your vision would be for this.
Well, there definitely has to be a transition. There has to be a plan for a way through a fossil fuel economy to a greener economy. And we certainly can't do this individually. I can't do this in my home. You can't do it just in your home. We need the assistance of leadership, governance, subsidies directed towards encouraging a different type of economy, taking subsidies away from the old fossil fuel economy. And so it's really not any one thing that's going to make the difference, but it's going to require leadership, and leadership at our highest levels, to turn the ship, so to speak.
Yeah.
And
we've just come through an election, Trish, and some of the speeches I heard, the people running for office were talking about climate warming, but it didn't seem to be any really concrete plans, or very few concrete plans for that transition that you're talking about.
Well, it's true that if you look at the Liberal Party, there was great disappointment from environmentalists that the Liberals were adhering to the Harper's, the previous government's targets with regard to decarbonizing. It's really the Green Party that has been most honest and clear about what is needed in order to make a change, and that is based on reducing. I'm not sure. I will take a look here because I think that there's been a few different targets, but reducing greenhouse gases by 60% by 2030, and then becoming down to 0% by 2050 in terms of emissions, carbon emissions. And those were based on the Intergovernmental Panel, the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So that was, the most recent reports from scientists all over the world, that reviewed all the data from all the science and research to say that this is what's needed. And if we're to keep warming at 1.5 degrees above the 2005 figures. And the fact is that if we go beyond that 1.5%, then we get into this very unknown territory, and all they seem to know about it is that they get these feedback loops where it doesn't matter what efforts we make by that point, because the damage will be looping and continuing to make things worse and worse, suggesting the extinction that people are talking about.
But see, the thing is, you talk about that, Trish, I think of there's an article I read last week on the melting ice both in the Arctic and the Antarctic.
Yes.
And the rising of water, and it listed some of the cities that could very well be inundated with maybe 9 feet of water. What do you think it's going to take to wake people up?
That is such a good question. That is a very good question.
But you are doing it through what you did on the September the 27th. You woke up 800 people.
Well, we, as meaning the organizers and beyond that, those in the Alliance of Climate Action activists, we jumped on to a movement that was going around the globe, the climate strike movement. And as you know, Greta Thunberg was very much a visible spokesperson about that movement. And it took place just before the summit that took place in New York, where the leaders were pulled together again to see what they were really truly going to commit to make this happen. So, it does require a global voice, and it requires voices from every part of our country. And this is why I think proportional representation in our electoral system is critical if we're going to do anything with climate action, anything significant. We need everybody on board. We need to hear everybody's voice and have it contribute to what we make a plan to do, so nobody feels left out and everybody's encouraged. There's such a thing as that we've all been sort of inspired by, or many of us have been inspired by, called the Green New Deal. And we that day that you refer to in such glowing terms, we're all very happy about that day, the Global Climate Action Day in Peterborough on September 27th. But we created a list of demands that were then walked with the whole collection of people that came to the event, walked to the offices of all the federal candidates.
Oh, yes.
And to deliver a list of demands. And I have these demands here. I don't know if you'd like me to read them off, because they really do, in answer to your question about how do we make this happen, it isn't about any one thing. It's about a holistic approach.
Yeah, because it is a very complex
Very.
issue. Very complex. And there's so many players in it who are either aware or are not aware, are acting or not acting. So, it'd be good to hear what your own group came up with as far as asking the politicians.
We didn't, like the wheel, we didn't have to reinvent the wheel. A lot of this came from the Climate Strike website, and it was put together by many people before us, but we embraced these 7 demands, because we felt that they were ones that we resonated with very strongly. So the first one, of course, is the rights of Indigenous peoples. So we wanted to ratify and implement the United Nations Declaration on the Right of Indigenous People. It's called UNDRIP, in full, with special attention to free, prior, and informed consent. So, of course, free, prior, and informed consent is what they suggested they were doing when they were exploring the Trans Mountain
Yeah.
pipeline, that they were going across through all the indigenous
Yeah.
territories and those, areas, territories where indigenous peoples had control. And they were suggesting that they were going to get free prior informed consent. Well, people question whether that was really done or not.
Oh, yeah.
Because the history of colonization has suggested
Right.
that this was never done.
Yeah, that's right.
But in order I believe in order for us to move ahead effectively in making climate changes, we need to bring everybody into the circle.
Yeah.
And so the first peoples that have to be in the circle are our first peoples,
Yeah.
our First Nations. Secondly, protection of the most affected groups. So we know when we look at even the election results right now, Alberta and Saskatchewan, no votes at all for the Liberals, right?
Right.
They're not even represented in the House
Yeah.
at this point. We don't know what that's going to what we'll make of that. But protection of the most affected groups. So recognizing that Canada's disproportionate role in climate crisis and our subsequent responsibility to protect the most vulnerable include the addition of climate displacement as a basis for refugee status, provide climate aid to lower and middle income countries as well as Arctic Canada, which inordinately experience the immediate impacts of global warming. So yes, these are really vulnerable groups globally. But I was also thinking of the transition, the just transition. So transition to renewable energy and sustainable transportation infrastructure while guaranteeing opportunity for fossil fuel workers, the ones in Alberta and Saskatchewan, so guaranteeing them opportunity in the new economy.
So what does that really mean?
Well, I think it's been spoken of very eloquently by both Elizabeth May and Jagmeet Singh from the NDP about people in the fossil fuel industry have expertise that's very transferable. Their skills are very transferable to the green new technologies too. And so with the effort and focus on that, they talk about opportunity rather than loss. They talk about this could be a great opportunity and an opportunity to get away from the boom bust cycles of fossil fuel industry.
Yeah.
So it really could put some of these areas like Alberta on a much more stable footing. And there's certainly, that's something that I think they need to hear. I think that
because if you're going to transition away from fossil fuel, are you talking about wind power and sun power?
Well, those are two, and I'm not an expert in all the other ways that we can create energy without doing damage to Mother Earth.
That's right.
But there's also the cleanup. There's also the cleanup of the damage that the fossil fuel industry has,
that's
done
to
the province of Alberta.
Yeah.
So not only the generating of new green technologies, but also the taking care of the damage
that's
that has
been done.
Yes.
The healing of the earth.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So some of the others were the reducing greenhouse gas emissions by the 60% below 2005 levels by 2030, and enforce this through legislation. We talked about environmental rights, enshrining in law the fundamental right to a healthy environment, which is so critical.
Well, yeah.
So critical. This would include, but is not limited to, the right to safe air, clean water, and healthy soil.
Yeah, because one scientist I read, and he posited that a healthy earth gives healthy people. A sick earth results in sick people.
Well, those are our indigenous teachings, aren't they? I mean, they knew so much because they knew how to take care of the earth so the earth would take care of them.
You, exactly.
And I think you said your father had a story about that too.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
it's not rocket science.
No.
It's,
Well, of course, that's the other part of it, isn't it? Okay, continue on there.
well, we
Trish.
talked about the environmental rights for clean air,
Uh-huh.
safe air, clean water, and healthy soil,
Keep going.
and conservation of biodiversity.
Uh-huh.
So maintain and protect the old growth forests,
Oh, yeah.
restore the cut blocks, reduce habitat fragmentation, so that there's always a highway, so to speak, for the wildlife to move
Yeah,
through,
right.
right? Their own highway, not our highways.
Not our highways.
And strengthen and the protection of at-risk species. For instance, even locally, we know that the common loon is starting to move north
No, yeah.
because the waters are too warm.
Too warm here?
Yeah. So that's going to change over time. We may lose listening to the
Yeah.
lovely call of the loon.
Call of the loon, eh?
And then the last one that we had indicated on our demand list was the separation of oil and state. Now, it used to be religion and state. Now it's the separation of oil and state.
Oil and state, yeah, that's right. Yeah, because there's very often a tie-in there, isn't there?
Yes.
Between the two?
Yeah. So, reject all new fossil fuel extractions, no more extractions, or transportation projects, so no new infrastructure for an old technology that's dying,
Yeah.
and eliminate fossil fuel subsidies and price pollution. And of course, the Liberals have started down that road of, trying to price pollution with the carbon tax, but they've gotten great resistance,
Yeah.
largely from the Conservatives.
Yeah.
And I think that it has been proven, even through the economists
Mm-hmm.
that look at this issue, that they say that it is an effective way to change people's lifestyles and habits, and to change the lifestyles and habits of the corporations,
Yeah.
because they have to consider those externalized costs, the
Yeah.
ones that we never considered before, like the damage they're creating. While
Yeah,
they're
that's
producing.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I have faint suspicion, Trish, that there'll be a lot of corporations that they're doing well financially, and they're afraid that if changes are made, they're not going to make so much money or go out of business altogether. I remember reading when Henry Ford brought out the cars, there was a big uproar because the people who made buggies and cutters and raised horses and harnesses, they said, this is our economy. What'll we ever do? Our jobs will all be lost. Well, they were, but a lot more jobs were created. And you foresee that with this transition into a new green economy, would there be an increase in jobs, or would jobs be there for people?
Well, that's what we hear. I mean, Elizabeth May talks about the great opportunities, not so much focusing on the great loss and the great suffering, but the great opportunities and the prosperity and wealth that this can bring to all.
Yeah.
And it's to all, not just to some, not just
Yeah.
to the elite, not just to the corporations, but to all.
To all, eh?
So looking for a fair wage, a guaranteed
Yeah.
income, all those things are part of the Green New Deal as
Oh,
well, in terms of bringing things into focus, in terms of leaving no person behind, right?
Yeah.
So we have so much wealth in our country that we can take care of everyone.
But what gets me, Trish, is that I didn't see this morning how much the Green Party got in the election. But
3 seats.
how much?
3 seats. They doubled their votes.
Yeah.
They got 3 seats.
So there is good movement. At least.
Yes, in this electoral process, first past the post, Elizabeth May speaks of this as being, a great progress.
Yes.
Because so many people who would normally want to vote for the NDP or for the Green, so to speak, held their nose and voted for the Liberals for fear that the Conservatives
Yeah.
would set us back 10 years.
Yeah. But I guess what strikes me is there's a horrendous job to awaken people, and I guess through your demands, that the governments have to exercise their power to force corporations to get in on an act?
I think so. I think so. Just something as simple as certifying buildings as safe, and lowering their emissions, and it's something like developing a gold standard that is just adopted across the country, and that the government would make demands that all buildings come up to this gold standard within a certain period of time, and that they would be given some help maybe to do so, depending on the organization or the be it the church community with their big churches that have to be turned into more efficient, to run more efficiently.
I know from being a pastor, paying the warming bills, heating bills during the winter when you're heating ceilings, 40, 50 feet up.
Right.
Crazy. Right. Oh, man. Telling you those bills every winter would choke a horse. But I think, too, and I guess the big thing Sheila and I were trying to do was to get the churches on side.
Yes.
And we didn't have much success, I don't think. But we'll keep at it. But it seems to me that the churches should be out front in participating in this work.
I absolutely agree with you, and I don't think it will be long before they do. I think this last global movement in September woke up. It woke up a lot of people to the fact that our children are suffering from anxiety, great anxiety, and just looking ahead to their own future. They're already deciding not to have children. And that's the end of our species right there, if children decide to stop having children.
That's right.
So I think that we woke a bit with this last month globally. And
so how about yourself? You going to stay at it?
Well, I think that you don't have a choice, really,
Right. And secondly, what's the next big event in Peterborough? Is there another one being planned?
Yes. Well, there's Extinction Rebellion in Peterborough too, and
is it in Peterborough?
Yeah. Oh, yes. We have a local chapter.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yes, and they are doing many different, staging of rallies and different events, and they come together very quickly.
Oh yeah.
They don't take a long time to plan necessarily. They do pop-ups here and there and whatnot. And we are certainly continuing to look at our next steps. For instance, hopefully campaigning for school buses to be electrified.
Electrified, yeah.
Because that is, the young people are more vulnerable in terms of the ill effects of pollutants, and they're standing by those. That's right. Those diesel buses and
carbon is coming out.
Yeah. So that would be one of the campaigns we want to take on. But I really think there's a buzz afoot that we should also be really addressing the electoral system and proportional representation again. Because this seems to maybe be the time to do so. Maybe we have a couple of years and to really push this forward. So I would hope to see that maybe we can affect change on that front too. And of course, that to me will bring in the voices that have not been.
Well, bring them in also to empower them.
Yeah.
They won't be just spectators to what's going on.
That's right.
So I think you said, what is it, 2030? That's the critical date?
Yes, it is.
Not too long.
Not too long for us to get our house in order.
That's right.
Yes, and it does require the leadership, and it's not I don't think as difficult as we might imagine in terms of just simple legislation that can be put forth to get people to be responsible and accountable for what they do locally and regionally, and then across the country.
But it seems to me too, part of this, one aspect of it, is really changing people's mind about the earth. the earth isn't here just for us to use and abuse.
Yes.
Like the earth has a life of its own, and it seems that people got to wake up. You use the term Mother Earth. Like, you know, our mothers nourish us and look after us and provides for us. I think there has to be a tremendous changing of people's mind about
Yes.
the role of Earth.
Yes. I think that's where the inclusion of a spiritual focus
Yeah.
is so important.
Yeah.
And it should underpin everything, and
Right.
it does in a sense in all the indigenous teachings. You know,
Yeah.
they're so respectful of Mother Earth
Isn't
and
that
what
true?
it has to give. But I also think it will be fueled, also, pardon the expression, by the forest fires, the devastating winds and
yeah.
floods, and all you know,
All
the ice melting and the oceans warming and the dying. Um, you know, the dying. Forgotten my words here.
That's okay. It'll come back.
Yeah, but you know, there's so much that we are seeing around us, and it's escalating.
Yeah.
So I think that should also. But again, as you say, because of all the things that are happening, I think that we do need to make sure people are being educated and informed properly.
Yeah.
So I think this is the other thing that locally that we have taken to our minister, Miriam Monsef, in the last term of office she was in, is that the Peterborough Alliance for Climate Action went to her with a
Yeah.
lot of demands such as I've spoken of today, but one
Right.
of them specifically was an education program that went
Yeah.
across the country.
Yeah.
That you could turn on your TV and you get things like, you remember in the 70s participation?
Yeah.
Where they'd be trying to wake us all up to the fact that we needed to be active. And,
Yeah.
and if we were active, we'd be more healthy.
That's right.
We need the same kind of
Yeah.
sort of campaign,
Yeah.
only with respect to people understanding how what we do as, you know, both as an individual and as a nation,
As a nation, yeah.
is impacting on our future health
Yeah.
and our ability to thrive.
And I think that's good because if we're selfish, and humans can be very selfish, that if it's in our self-interest to make life more livable for future generations, I think that's a big part of it. But like you say, I think there's a lot of work to be done, and whatever your next project is, Trish, I'm sure that it will contribute to that, because I think they get 800 people out on September the 27th to gather on that beautiful day and all together. Like, I think it was a tremendous success.
And they were all ages were represented.
Yeah.
All ages
And,
are represented there, which
so
was great.
I certainly compliment you on it, and also wish you well in the future, that you'll continue to have events that you said educate us, wake us up.
Well,
Wake us up.
one thing I do want to just address is that this was an alliance. This was a collaboration of many people.
Naval people, yeah.
And it was, you know, that's what made it a success.
Yeah.
And reaching out to people in different sectors that could mobilize people in their sectors
Yeah.
that made it a success.
Yeah.
So it wasn't any one person. I just happened to hear about this global event happening and thought, gee, Peterborough can be part of this.
Yeah.
And we just set the wheels in motion. But after that, it was all the wonderful people that
Yeah.
usually are involved in the environmental
Yeah.
concerns, and then everybody else that jumped into the
But they're
the
here.
rally. Yes.
We have people who are
Yes.
very committed,
Absolutely.
very committed, and care about the earth and future generations. So I see, Trish, we've run out of time. I want to thank you for coming today
Thank you
and
for inviting
to
me.
speak so eloquently about the work that you're doing and other people in Peterborough. And, you know, in a sense, we're just getting started.
Yes. Yes.
Just getting started.
Yes.
But it's a good start.
Yes.
And I think I have to believe in my heart of hearts that we are going to be in this transition will in fact happen, and life will go on planet Earth for all the species.
Yes.
It's my hope, my vision. So I thank you very much for coming today.
Well, thanks for your vision and your role in all of this as well.
Okay. So thank you, Trish.